What is up, everyone? I am TST's the Mudman, and it's time to figure out what we're going to play this weekend ranked in Gods Unchained. So another week has gone by with no, balance patches or anything. So the meta is the same as it's been for the past, month and a half or whatever. That being said, next week is going to be very exciting. 20 brand new cards are being added to the game. That'll surely shake up the meta. But this week, it is same old, same old. So we're on GU decks. We're looking at Mythic rank gods by win rate. Usually we look at it by popularity, but the meta has been pretty much the same for well over a month, so everybody knows the god popularity. Um, since the meta, hasn't changed, we're going to do it similar to how we did last week. I have 3 budget decks to go over, as well as 3 just high win rate decks. But before we look at any specific list, let's go over the meta just a little bit, because it has slightly changed between this week and last week. So the highest win rate god is War. Control War has been the best god, or the best archetype for a long time, and that's because Zoolight's the most popular archetype. Aggro Nature and Aggro Deception are also very popular, and Control War is great against both of those. The next highest win rate god is Deception. Deception is also the most popular god. Deception can either be Control Deception or Aggro Deception. Uh, they're roughly the same in popularity. For the past couple of weeks, Aggro Deception has been slightly more popular, but this week Control Deception has overtaken Aggro Deception making up about 9% of the meta, where Control Deception is 9.6%. So pretty much the same, but leaning ever so slightly towards Control Deception. Then we have Light, which is almost always Zoolight. Some players have been experimenting with Control Light, but it's like 95% of the time it's going to be Zoolight. Zoolight is very strong. It's been strong for pretty much a month and a half. Then we have Magic. Magic can be, it can be combo magic, it can be control magic, tempo magic, lots of stuff, but control magic is the most popular of the magic archetypes. Then we have Death. Death can be zombies or Anubians. For the past couple of weeks, zombies have been ever so slightly more popular than Anubians. However, like Deception, Anubians have overtaken zombies in popularity this week. Not by a ton, but Anubians are slightly more popular. And like I say every week, if you're running into your Death opponent and they pick Soulburn, that means they're zombies. And if they pick Blood Ritual, then they are likely Anubians. They could technically also be Board Wipe Death, but Board Wipe Death is not very popular at all. So, generally speaking, Soulburn zombies, Blood Ritual, and Nubians. And then finally, we have Nature, the least powerful of the gods. Nature is usually going to be aggressive Wild Nature. It could also be aggressive Amazon Nature, but Wild is definitely more popular than Amazon. Similar to Light, people have been experimenting with Control Nature decks. A lot of the gods have been experimenting with Control archetypes in order to combat the Control War decks. So it's possible that you run into Control Nature. However, it's similar to Light. It's going to be like 95% of the time. It's going to be Aggro Nature, whether it be Wild or Amazon. So now that we've talked about the meta a bit, let's jump into some lists you might want to play this weekend. Alright, and the first budget deck I want to go over is this Hidden Rush Deception deck made by 3 question marks. As you can see, it's $16.50, so it is a very cheap deck. It has a 63.3% win rate over almost 80 games, so it's quite strong. As you can see, it's missing some standard Hidden Rush Deception legendaries. There's no avatars, there's no Lady Marcellas, there's no Merrics. Instead, we have cards like, there's 2 Selfless Guildmates in here, 2 copies of Makeshift Shiv. Usually there's only 1 copy. We also have cards like Iron Tooth Goblin here, as well as Vanguard Axwoman. Vanguard Axwomans aren't usually in Hidden Rush Deception decks, but they are very strong. Essentially, this is like a pretty standard Hidden Rush Deception list. I think it's very strong. There are 2 cards, however, that I don't really understand or don't necessarily like, and that would be the Iron Tooth Goblin as well as the Bound by Her Will. Both these cards are fairly strong. Relic removal is never horrible. Stealing creatures is always good. Let's talk about Iron Tooth Goblin first. In my opinion, Hidden Rush Deception doesn't really worry about relics, right? Like, Anubians have relics. Destroying Skull Scepters is usually nice, but Hidden Rush Deception is incredibly favored against Anubians anyway. It's very hard for them to kill off their own creatures when yours are hidden. You can also steal their key Anubians with Umbra Arrow, so Anubians aren't really that scary. You should be able to outrace like a light deck that's using Lysander's Spear. Lysander's Spear is a relic that you generally like destroying, but you should be able to outrace them. Against War, like destroying their magic missile launcher still hurts you. So like in my opinion, you probably want to just be faster than most of your opponents. So I don't love the Iron Tooth Goblin. And then Bound by Her Will is just interesting in here because there's no stat reduction cards. There's no like Blade Borrowers or Beguiling Blades or anything like that. So getting a creature to 1 strength is fairly difficult. There are of course cards like Marchwalkers and Beetles and Pacifists and Corrales Rune Moss that you can steal, but there's not a ton of creatures with 1 or less strength floating around just naturally, and with no cards to aid it, I think it's a little difficult to deal with. In my opinion, I'd like to swap both these cards out and just put in Fermentari Instigator. That card works really well. You can see there's tons of guild creatures in here, so you can refill your hand, just spill out everything and then refill. And 2 Fermentari Instigators is actually cheaper than 1 Iron Tooth Goblin, so that'll actually lower the price of the deck altogether. And yeah, all in all, I think this is a very nice deck, and I think it should do well this weekend ranked event. Alright, and our next budget list is this Amazon Nature deck. This deck has played 145 games, a 61% win rate, and only costs $8.60. It is incredibly cheap. It's a sort of normal Amazon Nature list, at least like from a curve perspective. We have all of our cheap Amazon creatures as well as some of our Amazon payoff cards like Canopy Sniper. There's a lot of one-ofs in this deck, and a lot of interesting cards. One of which is Nemean Lion. Nemean Lion is a 3-mana 2/3 with an ongoing effect of gain +1/+1 whenever you play a roar creature, or actually whenever anyone plays a roar creature. And as you can see, there are lots of 1-mana creatures in this deck, many of which have roar, which can compound on Nemean Lion's effect. There's also lots of echo creatures in this deck, which make 1-mana creatures with roar. So Nemean Lion actually seems quite powerful in this deck. We also have Svar Basilisk for some relic destruction or some anti-sleep stuff. We have some Amazon payoff cards in Archimonian Onslaught. Only 1 copy because Archimonian Onslaught's kind of weak. It doesn't buff any health, so it's you really have to have a strong board for it to be good. But if you can stick it, it's very powerful. We've got Veilward Minotaur in here for some more value. We also have Grove Summons for some more value. Some pretty strong early game removal. 1 copy of Fey Flame Blade, 1 copy of Canopy Barrage, and 1 copy of Lightning Strike to deal with your opponent's creatures. It seems like a strong deck. Like I said, at $8, it's very cheap. It seems like a good shell. There's a lot of one-ofs. You might want to just go through the deck, decide what card you like, and put 2 copies in. But it seems very strong. It's played almost 150 games with a very respectable win rate. So if you're looking to play a nature deck for very cheap this weekend, a list like this could be very good. Alright, and our final budget deck to go over is Zoolight. This list was made by triple question marks, and for the most part it looks like a very normal Zoolight list. If you just take out the White Plains cards and the Highborn Knights and a couple legendaries, Zoolight becomes a very affordable archetype. One thing you might notice is this deck is far more expensive than any of the budget decks we've discussed so far at $37. That being said, the CERN is $18 on its own, so if you just remove CERN from the deck, it falls down to about $20, a much more reasonable price point. But yeah, like I said, this deck seems very normal. It only has 1 card that I think is like a little strange, and that's City Sniper. City Sniper is not a bad card. It obviously makes sense. You're a zoo deck. You like to make value trades. This allows you to turn like a Pyramid Warden into a 0 attack creature, and you can take trades that destroying your own minions. That being said, it doesn't seem like a particularly strong card. So in my opinion, if you want to make this deck more budget friendly, I would remove the City Sniper and the CERN and replace them with 2 Loot Hoarders. Loot Hoarders will draw you cards, similar to how the CERN will draw you cards. They're also hidden, which means they're very good to like catch all the buff cards. They have 2 attack, obviously, which means they can be buffed by Asterius. Encumbered Looter just sort of seems like a card that Zoolight would really like to take advantage of. You also, of course, have Protected Benediction that also works with said Encumbered Looter. Yeah, so Zoolight's been the most popular archetype for well over a month now. It's very powerful. It can be powerful in a budget-friendly version, and a list like this with those small modifications I think should do very well this weekend ranked event. Alright, now we have the first of our high win rate decks. This is a Control Deception list made by 2 question marks, and this is the exact same Control Deception list we talked about last week. This is also the best performing deck of last weekend ranked event, going 17 of 18. Control Deception is kind of just good against everything at the moment. It has very strong anti-aggro stuff in the early game to survive all of the Zoolight, Aggro Nature, and Aggro Deception opponents. We have lots of stat steal creatures as well as Umber Arrows to like steal tempo. We have strong removal spells in Hunting Trap as well as Stone Skin Poison. You have your Orfeo to destroy a creature of any size. And then just good creatures like Armor Lurker is always good for a couple of trades. Switch Duelist is always good for trading up. You have your Rapture Dance to clear those big boards, Blade of White Plains to destroy creatures, draw your cards, and then finally Demo to just like destroy the aggro opponents. If you're playing against a control archetype, obviously you have your Cutthroat Insights to take whatever, take their win condition or take whatever high value card they have. You have Patient Pickpockets for even more value. You have Reflection Elementalists to turn your little creatures into high threat creatures. And then you, of course, have your Therial to just outvalue any of your other control opponents. However, that's never a problem because you have Cutthroat. So essentially speaking, Control Deception is just sort of good against everything at the moment. It's not as strong against aggro as Control War is, but this is a deck that can beat both Control War and aggro decks. So it's very good in the meta currently and should perform very well this weekend ranked event. Alright, now we have Expensive Zoolight. This list was made by this combination of letters and symbols. And as you can see, it's very similar to the budget deck we went over before, but it does have those very powerful, very expensive cards. We got the Lysander Spears, the Highborn Knights, the Cerns, the White Plains, the Pyramid Wardens. Zoolight's been the most popular archetype for well over a month now for good reason. It's very strong. As you can see, the creator of this deck has a 69% win rate over almost 90 games. The world at large has played 215 games with a 63% win rate. So this deck wins the majority of the time. It's also like a very aggressive deck, so you should be able to finish your weekend run fairly quickly. So if you're a fan of Zoolight, a deck like this should perform very well this weekend ranked event. Alright, and the final archetype to go over is Control War, and this deck is actually very interesting, because this is a community contest deck. If you didn't know, this week's community contest was play a deck with 10 legendaries in it, and this deck has 10 legendaries, hence the strange cards like Anagrios or like Grendel. But as you can see, this deck has gone 17-0, perfect 100% win rate, and 61 players have played this deck with a 68.9% win rate, so overall a very, very powerful deck. Now obviously over the weekend ranked you don't need to have 10 legendaries in your deck, so you can definitely afford to get rid of some of those strange cards like the Anagrios or the Grendel or maybe the Grand Hall, and that way you can double up on your White Plains cards, especially Martyr of White Plains. There's so many great Martyr of White Plains like combo pieces in this deck. You have, obviously you have Therial, the same way all control decks have Martyr of White Plains and Therial, but this deck also has Helmna, which pairs really nicely with the Martyr. It has Kaya, which is always nice with the Martyr. It has Herdicus, all very powerful creatures to pair alongside the Martyr, and as you can see, this deck has a perfect 100% win rate, so it's very powerful, and it has room to improve in optimization. So I think a list like this could perform very, very well this weekend ranked event. Alright, so it is conclusion time. What deck should we play this weekend ranked event? Well, in my opinion, all of the decks that we talked about today should be strong. If you want to run with the pack, you can go with the Zoolight. If you want to destroy all of the aggro decks, you can go with Control War. You can go with Control Deception if you want to beat the Control War decks and the aggro decks, but be slightly weaker against the aggro decks. But whatever you decide to go with, try to have fun. Tell us how you did in the TST Discord. Get hyped for next week's Winter Wonderland festivities, and have a wonderful day. Hey, you! Did you know that subscribing to the TST YouTube channel will increase your win rate by 6.9%? So what are you waiting for? Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for notifications. And while you're at it, equip Scythe of the Harvest and attack the like button directly in the face. Bye-bye!